Hi Copic fans, welcome to Copic in the Craft Room. My name is Michelle Houghton, and today in Copic in the Craft Room we are going to be looking at another piece of our series on shading and light and values. What we're going to be tackling today is the concept of shadow versus cast shadow. So they're actually two different terms and significantly different. It's not a big one, it should be short and sweet, but it's something you need to know as an artist. It's going to take your art to the next level. It's really important. We're also going to throw in just a starter at that idea of what shadows and cast shadows, how those are different on your image and how to make them look even deeper. All right? So I'm going to shift to my table where we have a little bit better view of my hands and work, and that way you can get a good view of what we're doing with those shadows and cast shadows. Here we are at my workstation, and I am hoping that we are going to be okay. I'm fighting some light issues today as I record. We have some big storms here in Iowa. This image is from For Daisies. She is still one of my favorite artists. I love the edge of realism in her work, and I think some of her mother and children images are just some of the most beautiful and touching that are out there. I have colored this image already, and so hopefully this is going to go fairly quickly so I can show you what I'm talking about. Really, the concept we're tackling today or talking about today is shadow versus cast shadow. This image already has shadows. The shadow is the darkest area of shading in each area. So my light source this particular time is coming in from the right, and you can see shadows distinctly along the mother's neck, along her face, under her cheekbone, even on the side of her nose. You can see shadows on the child, along the cheek, along the jawline, side of the nose, deepening the eye, and off to the left side of the face. You can see shadows on the mother's blouse. You can see shadows on the back of the hand, the front of the top on the infant, some on the arms. But those deepest areas of shading are considered shadows. Now I can deepen those further, if I would like, by adding a different color. So I'm going to show you how I do that. Now, again, this is me, this is Michelle, this is my technique. I've learned it from other people. I've learned to manipulate my colors myself to some extent. This is how I do it. Does it mean it's the one golden rule? Absolutely not. There's people that do this differently. There's people that use different colors to create these deeper shadows. Grays work beautifully, but for skin tones in particular, I actually prefer to use blue violets, some of my BVs. So what I'm going to use, I've got very light skin tones going on. My little girl or my infant, I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, my infant, the face was colored with R000 and R01. I intended it to be a very rosy, light face. So I'm going to go with a very, very light BV000 to add some deeper shadows on that face. The mother is a little bit darker. Most times that happens. We have a little bit darker skin. It's been out in the sun a whole lot more. She is a combination of YR000, YR00, and a YR01. You can see on the image that it's a much darker combination. It's a little bit peachier versus rosy pink. This one I'm going to use a BB00. So 2 zeros on that one, 3 zeros on this one. And literally what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in. These are dry. I colored this image about an hour ago. They are completely dry. I wouldn't have to necessarily sit that long. It's just the time I had in between. But I want them dry. So even if I had just finished, I would give them a second, shake that image around, and I'm actually going to come back and literally color right on top with these colors. So I am looking for the deepest areas of shadow, okay? So I am looking for those areas that have gotten the darkest already. I'm gonna come in and add just small amounts of this BV 000 on that infant's face. Is extremely subtle. I do not do any blending, but it darkens those shadows one step further. I literally leave it. I don't add any more. I just touch it, step away. So it is important to check your marker first. Make sure that the color that you're laying on top is gonna look okay, that it's not gonna look like a cast shadow, that it can soften and blend in with what's happening on your page. The mom is also going to get some BV. I'm using my BV 00 on her, again in those darkest areas. Very subtle, but it deepens those shadows. Now, those are shadows. The next part is, what is a cast shadow? A cast shadow is what happens when light throws a shadow down on the object behind it. So you can see shadows from my overhead lighting onto this piece of paper, creates a very distinct line. We can add cast shadows onto our images. Now, you don't have to add them everywhere, you don't have to add them at all, but it can add, again, one more sense of realism to your images. I would definitely consider two different ways to do cast shadows. I would either go back to your darkest color that you used for your shading and use that for your cast shadows, or you can do kind of, again, a BV and come in and add that on top. Test them out to the side, see what's gonna work for you. The issue with cast shadows is we do want them to remain crisp and clean. There is no blending involved with a cast shadow, and we actually don't want to feather. You can probably see on the mother's face, I was trying to feather that color in. So there's a couple places where it's a little more distinct, but as you get up into her cheek, it feathers in, and so I don't want it to be a super sharp line. I was really trying to add to that shadow that's on her neck. If I'm adding a cast shadow, I actually want it to be a crisp, clean line. It could be a little darker than my shadow, or it can be exactly the same. That portion is kind of up to you, and you can kind of play back and forth with that a little bit. I am going to start by adding cast shadows on the infant's face. I'm not going to add many. I'm going to add some up right next to the hair, next to this curl, and probably just a little bit under some of those bangs. I'm going to start by adding it in the darker color that I used on the infant's face, which is that R01. Very faint, but you can see that edge where it comes underneath, right along this left edge, skips over, comes underneath, right along the left edge, and right along the left. Remember that light's coming in from this side, so it's not going to create a shadow on this right-hand side. It's going to throw it to the left of that hair. I can do the same thing on the infant's shirt. The arm is definitely going to cast a shadow. So again, I'm going to use the darker color that I used on the shirt, which in this case is an RV55. So I really just have right under that elbow, because since that light's coming in from this side, we may or may not have a distinct shadow underneath the arm along the edge. We're probably gonna have a distinct shadow where this mom's hairline is. I'm gonna come in on her, I think, and go ahead and add that with my BV. So I've got my BV 00, and some of that's already been laid in where I added her deepest shadow as well. So underneath the hair as it sweeps down around the side of her face, a little bit underneath the bangs up top, and then she has this one little tendril that seems to come over her shoulder. I don't know if it's completely in contact with her skin, so I left a gap in between the shadow and the hair itself, showing that it's probably lifted up off the skin and throwing a cast shadow behind it. So cast shadow, and a little bit of a cast shadow up here. The one other place actually on the infant is definitely under the chin. I used the lighter shadow or color for that cast shadow up under the hairline, but I think I'm gonna go darker under the chin because the neck is already considerably darker. So I'm gonna go back to the BV that I used. So fairly simple. This isn't a super complicated image. It's a beautiful image, but I thought it'd be one that we could show you some of those small placement areas that you could increase some of your depth by adding deeper shadows and then also throwing in a few cast shadows. You can make those more distinct by going darker. You can keep them really subtle to start and add as you go. But I hope that gives you a sense of the difference between the two terms. A shadow is the deepest area of shading. The cast shadow is sitting on top of all your shading. Your image is dry, you come back and add those cast shadows because they're being thrown on top of all the shading that happens underneath on the object itself. All right, I hope you understand that, and if you have questions, please ask. I will be available to answer and hope I can clarify as needed. Have a wonderful, colorful day.